Like what you see? Like to be in the know? Visit facebook.com/WBGU and like us today. Stay in touch with what's new at WBGU-TV, national PBS programs, local productions, station events, and more.
Joe Boyle. I'm a teacher at Rogers High School in Toledo, Ohio. Last year, this would be February of 2011, my student Corey Fink and I were notified that we had been one of the 15 student teacher teams selected. This program is the Albert H. Small Normandy Institute Sacrifice for Freedom. Mr. Small was worried that the sacrifices of World War II were being forgotten and endowed this program to fly 15 student and teacher teams to Washington, D.C. and then over to the actual invasion beaches in Normandy, France. And then about a month and a half after we got picked, I got sick with cancer and got knocked out of the program. I couldn't travel. I was unable to travel in June of 2011, and the people at the Institute had told me if this trip goes forward again next year, you're first on the list. In January, they called me and said, we have room for another student, and I got to pick another student. So my principal and the other teachers in the department and I picked Samantha Fletcher to be the second Rogers student to attend the Normandy Institute.
The thing I'm most looking forward to is traveling and then experiencing history, because I do love history so much, and then being a part of it and being where it all took place, I think that'll just be a lot for me. I haven't moved around very much. I've been in Ohio my entire life, so going to Washington, D.C. and then France, that's going to be amazing. One
of the things I'm looking most forward to is growing up in Grand Rapids, Ohio with a cornfield from my backyard. I'm still trying to process the idea that I'm going to be standing near the Eiffel Tower. A big part of this program has been investigating one fallen soldier or sailor from the Overlord invasion. And Samantha has studied a sailor named Joe Vanaski from Youngstown, Ohio, who was lost at sea when his ship was sunk on the 5th of June, right before the invasion. A minesweeper that was clearing the way for everybody else hit a stray mine, and Joe was one of the 6 sailors blown off the ship and lost at sea. We'll be memorializing him when we get to France, but before we get to that point, we get to research him at the National Archives and learn more about his service and learn more about his ship. Finding Joey was really providential for us. We knew we wanted to profile a sailor, and so we looked at the names of Ohioans who were interred or memorialized at the Normandy Cemetery.
And there were about 6 people from Ohio, and I don't know, it's hard to explain, but Joseph's name kind of stuck out a little bit. It was crazy because you weren't really involved as much at the beginning, but more and more you got to know Joseph more.
Sam and I got to meet Joey's nephew in Cleveland a few months before we left, and his nephew put us in touch with his niece, who was old enough to have very vivid memories and recollections of Joey.
She immediately talked about how kind he was and generous, and that he was so good-natured. You know, like, she went on and said how he was never really angry at anybody. And that made me think a little bit, because normally when you hear about soldiers, they're angry, and Joseph was never angry.
It added so much to his story, where we weren't just telling the story of a ship and a guy who was on a ship, but the well-formed story of a man and a life.
It definitely changed the project. It became, I guess, it's hard to call it a project anymore. It definitely changed the face of it. You realize more, it's so much bigger than you could have if you read it in a book. And it is so much bigger than just Joseph, too.
My great uncle is buried in Plotty at the cemetery, and his story and the story of his unit in World War II, when I was a little kid, it was the stories of Uncle Paul that drew me into history. That was my entry point into history. And to be there at his gravesite and to be able to kind of come full circle on his story was a moment that I'm never going to forget. And it was a moment that not only made the larger war very personal to me, but brought into very sharp focus his sacrifice and our family's role in World War II.
I don't think I even realized before I left how crazy it is and how more kids my age should experience this, because it changes everything. And it's not just World War II anymore either, because then you look back at other wars and other events and other people, and it changes how you view everything else.
With my circumstances, that last year I missed out on this, and it was unsure if I'd get the opportunity to go again. To be able to complete this was a gift I couldn't have asked for, and yet I received it anyways. Knowing how many stories need to be told, for me, it gives me one more reason to push on in this career, one more thing that we need to do with these kids to create a generation that's not going to forget.
Scenic Stops is brought to you by WBGU-TV. Support great local programming by giving now at wbgu.org/pledge.